What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's talk about a scenario that sounds like it was dreamed up by a bored screenwriter. North Korean soldiers marching across Russian territory to confront Ukraine's forces in a conflict that keeps spiraling out of control. North Koreans trying to allegedly help the second strongest army in the world to defeat its much smaller neighbor. North Koreans, Russians, Ukrainians. It all started with Vladimir Putin's so-called special military operation back in 2022, an invasion that was supposed to end quickly but turned into a stalemate lasting nearly 3 years. Russia's losses have mounted, its resources have thinned, and now it is bringing its allies from places most people never expected. This is where Kim Jong-un steps in, sending his ill-prepared troops halfway across the globe with minimal training and zero clue about the battlefield they are about to enter. The idea was simple: flood Kursk with fresh troops, reclaim all that lost ground from Ukraine, and prove Russia is not the outcast state Western nations say it is. From the Kremlin's point of view, that was the perfect solution. If you have a manpower shortage, why not outsource your soldiers? Except this plan has already failed before they could even implement it. North Korea's so-called elite has turned out to be nothing more than undertrained and overhyped recruits, sent to one of the most explosive front lines on Earth. No wonder reportedly 30% of them have already been eliminated. And think about it, 30% of the entire force sent to Ukraine perished in just a couple of months. If that's not the statistics to confirm that they are being used as a cannon fodder, while simply absorbing Ukrainian attacks and buying time for conventional Russian army, then I don't know what else is. No wonder many North Korean soldiers had enough and they simply want to go home. But it is not that simple. It is not a military contract they can breach and be incarcerated as a result, no. In North Korean world, it is a death sentence. And most likely not just for them, but for their families and friends as well. Let's rewind back to June 19, 2024, when Putin visited Pyongyang and shook hands with Kim Jong-un. Their smiles for the cameras hinted at more than a casual diplomatic arrangement. Both men were drowning in problems. Putin's war machine was stalling in Ukraine, and Kim had a chance to emerge from international isolation by presenting his own brand of military muscle. They signed a defense agreement that obligated each side to assist the other if threatened, and this was the Putin's golden ticket. 2 months later, Ukraine pushed into Russian oblast of Kursk, giving Putin every excuse to activate his shiny new pact. Kim obliged without hesitation, sending thousands of North Koreans into Russia under the assumption they would become valuable reinforcements. But what nobody seemed to realize was the scale of cultural shock awaiting these troops. Most had never left home, literally, and their entire worldview centered on propaganda that glorified their leader and demonized anyone standing in North Korea's way. Suddenly, they were thrust into a war zone they knew nothing about. Even their Russian allies, quote-unquote, saw them as an expendable extras to patch up thinning front lines. Single-use soldiers, if you wanna call them this way. Once the soldiers arrived, reality hit hard. Viral videos show them receiving Russian uniforms, fumbling through stacks of gear, and trying to memorize words they had never heard in their entire lives. And I guys want you to picture it. A commander demonstrating how to lay landmines, while a confused North Korean conscript points at a scrap of paper, desperately trying to pronounce a foreign phrase. The language barrier is not the only obstacle. Weapons were also more advanced than they have used at home, and their training schedule was laughably short. Most had only a few weeks to master gear they had never seen before being sent to literally straight to front lines. Not surprisingly, morale hit rock bottom in a record time. Russian officers treated them like a literal cannon fodder, suspecting they were just warm bodies Kim had tossed Putin's way to earn some political points. No wonder these records started losing faith in any chance of survival. Their entire worldview was crumbling, replaced by the horrifying realization that Ukraine's artillery does not care if they understood Russian language or not. Weeks into their deployment, the North Koreans got their first taste of Ukrainian firepower in Kursk. Reports trickled in about artillery strikes pounding positions where these newcomers were trying to train under combat conditions. Some had assumed they were in a safe zone, only to be surprised by deafening blasts. Suddenly, the illusions of a controlled environment shattered, replaced by the realization that Ukraine's forces know exactly how to fight. Casualties piled up quickly. Terrified conscripts realized they were stuck between a rock and a hard place, either follow Russia's orders and risk instant annihilation, or try to flee and face the wrath of Kim's security apparatus back home. Rumors circulated that North Korea punishes entire families if soldiers desert, leaving very many petrified. Meanwhile, Ukraine's leaders recognized how unprepared these opponents were, calling them easy targets for seasoned troops. Some even suspected that Putin welcomed such heavy losses among Kim's forces, as it spared more Russian men from the very same fate. Desertion began anyways, with small groups deciding starvation and the possibility of capture was worth the try in comparison to certain doom in the trenches. Each new deserter's story fueled panic among those still on the battlefield. North Koreans found themselves in the reality of unknown area, unspeakable language, and never-seen-before technology. Seeing their comrades dying every day only increased the panic, forcing them to make rash decisions, such as trying to come back home. Somehow. No matter what was waiting for them there. That is the problem in the future, they thought. An artillery shell flying your way, that's the current and much more pressing concern. Some war analysts thought that this Kursk offensive was going to be a rapid skirmish, like Ukrainians would try to capture it to prove the point, and to get an upper hand in potential negotiations. This sector also became the Kremlin's attempt to reassert dominance after enduring catastrophic losses. Putin assembled around 50,000 troops, including these new arrivals from North Korea, to stage a counteroffensive and push Ukraine back across the border. Official statements promised a swift victory, but the propaganda clashed with reality. President Vladimir Zelensky began revealing the dire toll inflicted on the North Koreans, citing nearly 3,800 of them killed or wounded in record time. That's more than 30% of this reported 12,000 that arrived to fight for Putin. Ukrainian artillery, drones, and well-fortified positions turned wave after wave of North Koreans into statistics. The fundamental flaw was not even about the morale at first. It was strategic incompetence. Russia's leadership deployed these newly arrived soldiers in mass infantry assaults, expecting them to break Ukraine's lines through sheer numbers. This was the very first experience, by the way, of Stalin's Soviet-style military tactic for North Koreans. But Ukraine's defenders had spent nearly 3 years perfecting their strategies and skills, learning how to repel assaults with minimal losses. Everything the North Koreans tried to do, whether storming entrenchments on foot or fumbling through last-minute training sessions, proved less effective than the Kremlin had hoped. At this point, it is perfectly obvious that one of the biggest drawbacks of these North Korean soldiers was absolute lack of combat proficiency. They paraded good, they performed cool acrobatic tricks, they even looked very dangerous in military uniform. But in reality, the total absence of real combat experience became their doom. You cannot learn swimming by reading books about swimming. For decades, Kim's regime has bragged about the strength of its armed forces, but practical exposure was only restricted to standoffs along the demilitarized zone or routine drills at home. Most of these troops had never fired more than a handful of live rounds, and their knowledge of modern weaponry was severely limited. They arrived in Russia without even basic Russian language skills, causing training sessions to descend into comedic chaos. Worse yet, North Korean soldiers found themselves trapped in between awful and horrible choices. They obviously were not combat ready, which meant extremely high probability of being killed. They could not surrender either, as fear of retribution against their families back home was ingrained in their psyche. They could not run, because Pyongyang's officers were assigned to monitor on them closely, ready to report even the slightest, tiniest acts of disobedience. Stories emerged of some choosing death over capture, believing it was better than the consequences awaiting them if labeled traitors. This mindset played right into Putin's hands, because the North Koreans would rather charge into certain doom rather than be taken as prisoners. No wonder thousands perished so quickly. They were pinned between the cruelty of their own regime and the lethal efficiency of Ukraine's military. As the weeks drag on, even more details emerged. Some North Koreans vanishing into forests near borders, trying and hoping to outrun both Russian patrols and their own officers. Others surrendered to Ukrainian forces at the first opportunity, preferring capture over imminent death on the battlefield. But those who managed to flee faced chilling prospect of punishment if they were ever sent back to Pyongyang. Generational retribution is a reality in North Korea, where the sins of one individual can doom an entire family. Imagine the mental anguish of the young conscript stuck in Kursk, torn between risking his own life at the front or condemning his relatives to labor camps back home, or even worse. Meanwhile, glimpses of real news on smuggled smartphones revealed how truly grim the war was. They saw headlines reporting casualty rates that could top 90%, plus testimonies from experts saying they might not receive a single ruble of the promised wages. This shattered any last illusions about returning as rich heroes. They recognized they were sacrificial pawns in a fight that was not theirs to begin with. Under such oppressive circumstances, it is no wonder desertion rates rose despite consequences. But at the same time, hopes for a safe return home also began to fade. But it does not stop here, with the casualties already in double-digit percentage points. Zelensky publicly urged China to confront Kim Jong-un, hoping to pause or suspend completely the flow of North Korean reinforcements that might further prolong this conflict. Meanwhile, Putin seems obsessed with the idea of using every single willing body he can muster, even if it means sacrificing inexperienced soldiers to preserve Russian manpower. He was somewhat concerned at first, maybe, with the losses of the Russian soldiers, but when he received 12,000 unaccounted North Koreans that nobody cared about, besides their families of course, he was most likely ecstatic, thinking about the countless number of ways how he can use them to his advantage. There are even rumors that families of these North Korean soldiers don't even know where their husbands and sons are. Maybe the propaganda claims they are on some sort of a risk-free superhero mission of defending the West, but no other details are given. Which leaves us to wonder how many more men Kim is willing to lose, since nobody knows about what truly is happening. The geopolitical ripples could also be massive. If the United States withdraws support from NATO, as a fear concerned by Zelensky in most recent interview, Putin might feel motivated enough to welcome even larger groups of North Koreans. That would send a grim message about the future of European security. The more bodies Kim funnels into Russia, the less pressure Putin faces at home to mobilize additional Russian citizens. It is a twisted synergy of mutual desperation, without doubt. North Korea gets whatever resources or currency it's been promised, and Russia continues feeding foreign infantry into a grinder that shows absolutely no signs of slowing down. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. We also have our new Adidas caps with Freedom of Russia Legion flag embroidered. Very nice quality. It says, it is Adidas. What else do I need to say? Adidas. Every single Slav loves Adidas. If you want this hat, the iconic Russian Dude hoodie, or if you want to just browse around, we have a website, russiandude.com. The link is down below, more than welcome. This is one of the best ways to support my work by buying merch, so thanks so much for this, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and see you on Tuesday.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway.